Hi everyone, it's me Arden Lee, and the topic of today's video is there such a thing as too much processing? And how do we know when we've reached that line between doing the processing that we need to do to go into our feelings around an issue and come up with some sort of resolution for ourselves versus when are we engaging in wallowing, in negative spiraling? When are we indulging in emotions and getting addicted? Oh, I use that phrase. I use that phrase loosely, just because, not because I don't mean it, but because there's so many other interpretations of that term. When I say addicted to it, I mean that it is a pattern that we overlearn beyond its usefulness to us, right? So when I say we get addicted to these thought spirals, it's creating a pattern in our minds that is no longer helpful to us, right? So how do we tell the difference? This is also a question that was asked by someone who is a member of the Repatterning Parlor, which is the group that I moderate on Facebook, by the way. So if you're enjoying these videos, come and hang out with us. You can ask your questions and have them answered as well. There is a link in the description box to the Facebook group, and come and say hi. So in the meantime, I'm grateful for this question, and I want to divide it into two categories. I want to talk about when are we over processing with people who are in the situation, and when are we over processing just with ourselves, because those are two slightly separate subcategories. And for the first question, I actually bring this up because I recently read an article on autostraddle written by a woman named Vanessa Pamela, and she talks about this thing which is over processing with the people who are involved in the situation. And she talks about the ways that this can create harm, because when you're processing with someone, ideally what you want to do is you want to lay out all the details of the information so that everyone involved can make a good decision for themselves. And when everyone's thoughts and feelings and the details that everyone wants everyone to be informed of, beyond when that point has been reached, beyond that, there's a good chance that if you're still looking to process with people, that you're actually looking to shift the dynamic, or that you have some sort of an ulterior motive, even if it's an unconscious one, or some attachment to how other people are dealing with the situation. If you want to say, a good example of this would be, let's say, you want to process some things with your ex, but what you're really doing is you're trying to use that excuse of processing to maintain that connection there when they're trying to sever that connection with you and move on with their lives, right? Because maybe you feel like, well, if I just had a chance to process things with them again, then maybe they would change their mind, or what have you. So we want to start looking for, where are we having ulterior motives with people? Where are we attached to the ways that they are showing up? And where are we using those perhaps unconscious agendas where are those unconscious agendas perhaps motivating our desire for processing? So that's an opportunity to get super real with ourselves and say, what is the outcome? What is the end game here? Am I in this because I really feel like part of this discussion has not been heard? That there are more details that people need to know, or am I really just looking for this situation to change in a way that processing the first time didn't change it? And maybe I think if I have an opportunity to do it again, then something else will shift, right? That's a really great question to ask ourselves. And what this author recommends is, instead of doing this, instead of going to the other people who are involved in the situation, some things that we can do, first of all, are we can journal, right? Getting our feelings down in writing for ourselves, whether it's a journal that we keep or morning pages or whatever we're doing, is a really great way to clarify our feelings. Another thing we can do is talk to a professional, talk to our therapist, our coach, a counselor, whoever it is that we turn to in times like that in order to shift things forward. And also, a professional who's involved is going to have a pretty good handle, ideally, on how to help you shift that energy from those process spirals, that we're afraid that we don't want to be in that negative spiral of just overindulging in the emotions of sadness or anger just because we're feeling stuck there. They're going to have a good handle on how we can shift ourselves out of that, because ultimately the goal of processing is to arrive at some sort of conclusion for ourselves about how we want to move forward and what actions we want to take and how we want to proceed. So, journaling, talk to a therapist or professional. Also, talk to a friend who is, an objective third party who's not involved in the situation is a great idea. And also, finally accept that we all have feelings. Feelings can be transitory. We may not feel as angry or as activated around the same issue that we feel now a week from now, right? So sometimes it's like, I do this myself. I'll feel like, I'll feel stuff come up for me and I'll be like, I'm angry and I want to talk about this and I want to talk about that, even though these things aren't on the plate, right? They're things that maybe happened in the past and that maybe there's an opportunity to address them sometime going into the future if stuff, comes up again or whatever, but that it's not an immediate thing right now. It's not something that needs to be dealt with immediately. There's nothing that's on the immediate horizon that these past things would be affecting, right? And so when that happens, I try, I don't always succeed. Sometimes I feel like, I just have to get this out or else I'm not, I'm going to be super uncomfortable. But often what I'll try to do is I'll really try to check in with myself and say, you know what, this conversation doesn't have to happen now. If I have these feelings about it now, then, a week, 2 weeks, even a month from now, when these are more relevant, when this actual situation is more relevant, if I still have those feelings, I'll absolutely have opportunity to bring it up then. But if I'm feeling super activated and I'm coming at it from that place of a heightened emotion, maybe that's actually something telling me that now is not the right time to have that processing conversation, right? So that doesn't mean don't have conversations about things that are imminent, right? But I'm speaking about stuff that's like, oh, and that bothered me, and that bothered me, and that bothered me, and I didn't get to say that, and if this comes up again, then, well, maybe wait till it looks like maybe it's going to come up again, or wait for an opportunity, at least like wait it out a week or two and see if your emotions change. Because I know, you guys, I go through cycles sometimes where I'm like, wow, why am I just feeling awful? It's like, it's like our energies are really affected by, by the collective energies, by, the moods of people around us sometimes, which are also affected by things like the news, things like the current state of affairs, things like even, astrological, cosmological shifts. Not all of you might believe that, but I can tell you, I know when eclipse season is because everyone on the road is driving, erratically, and people get super like upset on Facebook and make these like weird, awful, super activated comments out of nowhere. I'm like, oh yeah, it's eclipse season again, right? So I see it, whether, you don't have to believe in the weather to know that it's happening. So I'm not attached to whether you believe me or not, but just know that there are a lot of factors that sometimes cause our energies to feel off, and our brains will look for confirmations that something is going wrong. And we might have to sit with that for a while and say, is anything actually happening here? Is there anything that's actually wrong with the situation? Or is my brain digging up old problems to be angry about because it's looking for a reason to justify why it's feeling this way, when the truth is it's just energies that are present in the collective that are kind of happening for everyone right now. So waiting a week or two is a really good idea in that sense. So that's what I would advise if you're worried about overprocessing with people who are involved in the situation. Now, if you're worried about overprocessing for just yourself, right? If you're working out a situation in your head, and maybe you're doing that processing with your friends or in your journal, and you feel like you're getting stuck, I want to really advise you to watch for that moment when you feel like you're getting stuck. Sometimes, there's situations that I'm still processing from about 2 months ago. No, about 1 month ago. From about 1 month ago. And I'm still allowing myself to look at it, to ask myself what's wrong or what do I need, or, looking at situations like that. And it's uncomfortable for me sometimes. And I notice when I'm doing that, it's because I genuinely haven't felt that clear resolution of a situation. And it's uncomfortable going in circles like that. But in my experience, it's even more uncomfortable just kind of letting it go if that's a situation that may present itself again in the future, right? If it's something from our past that we've cut ties with, or people we're no longer involved with, or whatever, then that may be one thing, right? That's something that there's no usefulness to over processing that, right? Unless it's about at some point, like, we have to acknowledge to ourselves that that we may not get closure from other people, and we have to get it from ourselves, right? So if we reach that point where we have to give closure to ourselves in order to move on, then that's what we need to do. And sometimes finding that closure is about processing for ourselves, right? But the goal is for us to actually find it so we can move on. And let's say that, it's a situation that we've done some processing over, but maybe our full feelings haven't risen to the surface yet. Maybe these are people who are still in our lives, and we feel like, in the future, I might have to have a conversation about this. I think that's okay. I want to make a disclaimer that if anything, I tend to overprocess. You guys, I'm an Aquarius sun, Pisces moon, and Gemini rising. So that means that, with my Pisces moon, I feel everything. My Aquarius sun, I try and make logical sense of it all with, systems and information analysis and synthesis in my incredibly, logic-oriented brain. And my Gemini rising means that I talk about it over and over until everyone gets sick of hearing it, which makes me a great coach, by the way. It makes me very empathic, very analytical, and very communicative. But sometimes I'm like, oh gosh, it must be hard to be friends with me sometimes. No, I just tend to be friends with people who are also overprocessors, and we process with each other. So I want to make that disclaimer as I'm making this video, you guys. Like, I'm someone who needs to find that resolution for myself at the very least. How do I feel about this situation? How am I going to proceed going forward? How am I going to let this situation influence my forward movement, my forward actions? And there's been some stuff that I've been processing, that happened about a month ago that kind of kept coming up for me. And I was like, oh, I want to leave this behind. I want to say that it's cool. We landed at a good, at a good place. But there's still, and the truth is, some stuff came up, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I think there was a shift here that I didn't quite make, and that's why this has been uncomfortable for me. I think this requires actually a bit of a shift in energy on my part, given the things that I'm thinking about, the things that I'm, working through, the ways that I'm, adjusting my understanding of the situation now that I've had a little more distance from it. And when you arrive at that place where you're like, oh, all right, that's what it is, I think that's what we're really looking for. So I want you to look for where you feel stuck, and I want you in your processing to set the intention to get unstuck, right? And getting unstuck generally just means that you feel secure in having a plan of action for going forward. Whether that means that maybe you need to have a conversation with someone, or you just adjust your relationship to the situation, or you just adjust your energy, whatever that happens to be. But I will say for myself that if my processing is going around in circles and I don't reach that point, it tends to still come up for me every once in a while, especially when, there's weird energies going on in the collective and my brain is looking for something to be upset about. And it may take me a while until I unpack that. But the goal of that unpacking has to be to get somewhere, right? So this is a good thing to ask a counselor, a therapist, or a coach, or a trusted friend about. I'm looking to know how to move forward in the smartest way possible, right? I'm looking for the solution. Sometimes when we overprocess things, or we get really stuck in those emotions of anger or sadness, are oftentimes when we don't want to do the thing that situation that our processing is telling us we should do. I had a situation happen last year where I was stuck in some really intense anger for several weeks, and the truth about that situation was that I had to cut a cord in order for me to return my own emotional balance. And the reason that it took me so long and so much processing to get to that state is because in my mind I was trying to make a lot of excuses for the person. I was trying to, I didn't want to do the thing that I had to do, which was to finally just, cut free. And once I cut that cord, I felt not only a ton of freedom, but a ton of space open up in my life. I had a big wave of abundance come in because I had created so much space by moving away from something that had been taking up a lot of my bandwidth. And from there, I didn't have to process about that situation or how I was going to handle it any longer because I finally made that decision. So the question that you want to ask yourself when you feel like you're over processing something is, are you delaying on taking the action steps that you need to take, that you need to take? Or are you still processing because you're trying to figure out the best action steps to take, right? If you're getting to that solution, and I really do feel that there's like a that happens, right? There's like you'll get to that point where you're like, okay, I feel at peace with that. But in order to do that, you have to be looking for the resolution within, right? Not necessarily closure amongst a bunch of other people, because having your sense of resolution depend on the cooperation of someone else is going to keep you attached to their behavior, right? And they might not give that to you. So allowing yourself to find that resolution and just say, what does this situation tell me about the way I'm proceeding? How much energy am I giving to this relationship? Do I have to have more conversations around it? Do I have to have those conversations now? Or do I just have to have this when maybe a similar situation looks like it might come up in the future, so I can just go on record for, for how I feel about it, or what my needs and boundaries are in that regard, right? Do I just need to shift my energy? Do I have to have a conversation, or do I not, right? And once we've found some peace with those action steps that we've found that resolution and we feel secure on moving forward, then that's the time to move forward and create more of that space, right? But until we get there, if something is still bothering me and it's still circling in my head and I feel like I can't get rid of that conversation, I have never found that it's been healthy to ignore it. There are times where the resolution that I need to seek needs to be to just move on and disregard the relationship, and cut ties in the relationship. And that in itself is its own resolution. But if I'm still circling about it and nothing's moving, then at some point I need to decide what I'm going to do about that. So that's the intention that I'd love for everyone to set in their processing. What is your end game? Where is the resolution that you're seeking? How will you know when you get there? And you can ask your friends or your trusted professionals for help in seeking that. But that's how you're going to know when you're done. So I hope this is helpful. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.